You are Veronica Bland, and you live at 42 Gordon Road, Fulchester West.
That's correct, yes.
And what is your occupation, please?
I'm senior sister in the intensive care unit at Belside's Hospital.
Are you acquainted with the accused in this case? Miss Bland?
Yes, that is Mr. Stephen Saul, assistant to Sir Austin Semple, consultant thoracic surgeon at Belside's. He has been at the hospital for about a year now. He's an Australian.
And have you on occasion acted as theatre sister to Mr. Saul, Miss Bland?
I have.
Did you act as theatre sister to him during a particular operation he performed on the evening of May the 7th last? Really, Miss Bland, this is a perfectly straightforward question, I believe.
Yes. Yes, I was theatre sister in an operation performed by Mr. Saul on May the 7th on a patient from intensive care, a Mr. Eric Maple. The operation was for a heart transplant. Sir Austin Semple was not present. At first, the operation appeared to be a complete success, but on the following morning, Mr. Maple died.
Today in the Crown Court, Mr. Stephen Saul, surgeon of Belside's Hospital, Fulchester, faces 2 charges arising out of the death of Eric Maple, on whom he performed a heart transplant. One is a charge of criminal assault. The other is a charge of manslaughter.
I see. So on May the 7th, this operation was performed, and Sir Austin Semple wasn't present, you say?
No.
Now, is that an altogether usual situation?
I'm sorry?
Well, Sir Austin is the consultant thoracic surgeon at Belside's Hospital. A heart transplant, major thoracic surgery, and the consultant simply not there.
There is a team of 10 doctors on constant standby for heart surgery. Usually, when there's an emergency, Sir Austin leads them, it's true, but on this occasion, well, Mr. Saul did.
Sir Austin is Mr. Saul's superior, however, isn't he?
Oh, yes.
In both professional status and skill as a surgeon.
My lord, I must object. Although clearly a woman of wide experience in the medical field, the witness is being asked to make a comment on Mr. Saul's skill as a surgeon, which can hardly be called within her competence.
Quite. Mr. Golding, you shouldn't need telling that. Although Mr. Saul's skill as a surgeon is arguably a matter which is going to be of some relevance in this case. But before we get on with this evidence, I must confess to something that's worrying me about this case. It's about the earlier testimony from the pathologist, which established that Maple died as a result of internal hemorrhage following surgery, and that jaundice was revealed. Now, may this not all be a natural hazard from major surgery?
I'm afraid I don't follow, Your Lordship.
Well, in order to prove manslaughter, Mr. Golding, you must show that the accused was guilty of gross negligence in performing the operation that he did, and that his medical attentions were such as to accelerate the death of his patient. You see, some sort of accidental mistake from which death ensued would not be manslaughter. I refer you to Rex against Webb, 1834.
Yes, my lord, I have that authority with me. May I, in turn, refer you to Rex against Burdine, 1916, in which it is stated that a doctor must use competent skill and sufficient attention, or leave himself open to a major charge in a case of this sort.
That, of course, is a statement of general principle. It would still be necessary to prove negligence.
Oh, Your Lordship may rest assured that the evidence will show that Mr. Saul failed in the matters of both competence and attention, and also that by performing the heart transplant, he accelerated the death of his patient, Eric Maple.
Very well, Mr. Golding.
My lord. Miss Bland, perhaps it would be best if you were simply to tell the court what occurred at Belside Hospital on the night of May the 7th.
Well, Eric Maple was a patient who had been admitted to our intensive care unit about 10 days previously. He was a man with a bad cardiac history. But as it happened, he had responded well to treatment and was due to be transferred to an ordinary ward pending discharge on about May the 10th. At just after 7 p.m., however, on May the 7th, he suffered a massive cardiac attack. I was on duty and Mr. Saul was the roster surgeon. I summoned him and he at once applied the heart defibrillator.
The heart defibrillator, now what's that exactly?
It is a device for stabilizing the heartbeat after a coronary attack. Unfortunately, in Mr. Maple's case, it failed to produce the desired effect.
And so what was done next?
Mr. Saul said that we would have to put the patient on the heart-lung machine.
Perhaps you could give us some idea what this is too.
Well, What the heart-lung machine does is to channel the circulation through an exterior pump, bypassing the heart, so that the doctor is then free to examine the heart itself and find out exactly what's wrong. All this Mr. Saul did. And then he made a series of attempts to restart Mr. Maple's heart. However, even after the 6th attempt, it wouldn't take over.
Miss Bland, you must remember that you're talking to lay people here. Now, what do you mean when you say that Mr. Saul made a series of attempts to restart the heart, but it wouldn't take over?
Well, the heart-lung machine is only meant to be a temporary measure, my lord. The heart must resume its job of pumping the blood round the body, or nothing has been achieved. A patient on the heart-lung machine is, well, in an odd sort of state, really. He's neither cured of his illness nor properly sick anymore. In suspended animation.
Yes, I see. All right.
So you're telling us, are you, that Mr. Saul, having put his patient on the heart-lung machine, found that he couldn't safely alter their state of affairs? So what did he do as a consequence?
Around 8:30, he said that he would have to send for Sir Austin Semple.
Sir Austin wasn't in the hospital, in other words?
No. It was Saturday. He'd gone home for the weekend.
Miss Bland, can you remember the exact words Mr. Saul used when he told you he'd have to send for Sir Austin Semple?
I'm sorry?
The exact words.
Miss Bland, you seem afflicted by the strangest hesitations. Do you perhaps imagine you're assisting the accused by this display of reluctance?
I'm sorry, my lord, but I was hoping to be left out of all this when it came to court. Mr. Saul is a good surgeon and has always behaved well in the theatre, as far as I can tell. I'm really not very concerned in whatever it is has gone so wrong between him and Sir Austin.
Miss Bland, that is a comment and not evidence.
Yes, Miss Bland, simply answer the counsel's questions. Now, what were the exact words used?
He said, "Tell them it was carve-up night at the vet's, Veronica, if they ask why I took no action here. I'm turning this over to the old urger."
Old urger?
An Australian colloquialism, my lord, not complimentary.
No, obviously not.
But what did Mr. Saul mean by the other part of his remark, Miss Bland? Tell them it was carve-up night down at the vet's if they ask why I took no action here. Can you tell us?
Well, that was referring back to something which took place in my office in intensive care the day before. Sir Austin and Mr. Saul had come in the middle of a fearful row. I don't know what it was about, but they were both very angry. Mr. Saul accused Sir Austin of being stubborn and old-fashioned.
Were stubborn and old-fashioned the precise words Mr. Saul used, Miss Bland?
No, not exactly.
Let us then be exact, then.
Boneheaded and reactionary.
Thank you, Miss Bland. And Sir Austin made some response to this, did he?
Yes. Yes, he said that Mr. Saul should not be allowed to perform any more heart surgery in the unit for the time being, that Mr. Saul was obviously more concerned with operations than with patients, and that if his freedom of action were not curtailed, there was some danger that sooner or later he'd...
Yes. Sooner or later what?
He'd use a patient as a guinea pig.
I see. Now, to return to 8:30 p.m. or thereabouts on the night of May the 7th, did Mr. Saul in fact contact Sir Austin Semple?
He went to telephone. By that time, 2 other members of the standby team had been called up and they were supervising the heart-lung machine. So I made my way back to my office. On my way there, I met Mr. Saul returning. He had a slip of paper in his hand. He seemed very excited. He showed me the paper.
Or what was it, Miss Bland?
It was a notification from our casualty department saying that her heart was available.
Saying that her heart was available?
Yes, my lord.
Yes. Is it standard procedure for your unit to receive notifications of this kind?
Well, in any hospital that does transplant surgery, my lord, there's always the question of how you get the organs you're likely to need. As you may know, in the case of the heart, it's especially difficult. One can't have a bank of hearts, as you can of kidneys, say. Mostly you have to wait until a heart is available. That means an accident victim, as a rule, who's next of kin or willing to allow the heart to be used.
And that was precisely the situation which had arisen in your own casualty department?
Yes, a girl of about 22 had been brought in after a car crash. The head was pulped, but the heart was healthy and undamaged, and the parents had signed a release form.
I see.
Now, did Mr. Saul give you a certain instruction once you'd studied this notification from casualty, Miss Bland?
Yes. He said, "Stand by the transplant team, Veronica, could be we're in business."
And did you, in reply, ask a certain question of Mr. Saul?
I don't remember anything special. There really isn't any time when it's a question of a heart transplant, you
Miss
know.
Bland, I imagine we're all aware by now that you heartily dislike having to testify for the prosecution in this case. But you really mustn't keep evading the issues in this manner. It just wastes time, and it never works.
I believe I asked if Sir Austin would be leading the team.
And what did he reply?
Tell the others Sir Austin's in the country and can't be reached. The hell with Sir Austin Semple and the hell with Eric Maple. And then something to the effect that if he was supposed to be on the lookout for a guinea pig, then he'd just found a main contender, hadn't he?
Anything else, Miss Bland?
This is where I blind the world, Veronica, no matter what it costs. I'd like to say, my lord, that Mr. Saul is an exemplary surgeon. Really he is. I have seen very many, and I do know.
Thank you, Miss Bland. That will do.
You are Frida Jane Maple of 4 The Towers, Wiltwood, Fulchester?
I am.
What is your marital status?
I am a widow.
What was your late husband's name, please?
Eric Fordyce Maple.
How did his death come about?
In late April last, he was admitted to Belsize Hospital for treatment for a heart condition. There, a certain operation was performed upon him. There, a certain doctor murdered him.
Mrs. Maple, I entirely understand your feelings at the loss of your husband, but I will not tolerate accusations like that in this court. I certainly shan't want to caution you again. Members of the jury, will you please disregard that last remark? The prosecution alleged that the defendant was guilty of manslaughter, not murder. All right, Mr. Goulding.
Mrs. Maple, are you acquainted with the accused in this case, Mr. Stephen Saul?
Yes. Yes, he was the man who performed that operation.
What operation, Mrs. Maple?
A dreadful operation, an immoral operation, I say. Against nature and against God, too, probably.
You're a person of very strict principle, are you, Mrs. Maple?
I hope I know right from wrong.
Are you opposed to the very notion of transplant surgery?
When it's a question of a thing like a heart, yes, I am. Or if it was the brain, say, anything like that. Things are going too far these days, too far, and that's wrong, I'm sure of it.
Have you always felt as strongly as this on the subject, Mrs. Maple?
As far as I can remember. Me and my husband along with me.
So the late Mr. Maple was also opposed to the notion of transplant surgery, was he?
Oh, yes, we were quite agreed about things like that.
My lord, this is hearsay and, in my submission, quite inadmissible.
No, Miss Doctorby, I think this comes within the exception of the hearsay rule, which allows in matters which establish a relevant person's state of mind.
Will your lordship nevertheless make a note of my objection?
Yes, if you wish.